everyone. Welcome to this new panel of Independent Thought. For today's episode, we're going to be talking about the quote unquote Don't Say Gay bill that has just recently been signed into law by Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. I have 5 other panelists on the show for today. We're going to be talking about this. I'm going to introduce everyone really quickly. Just really briefly, just tell everyone a little bit about yourself, whether you're a streamer, podcaster, a candidate for office. Tell everyone your political leanings and where they can find you at. We're going to start on my right with Fresh Faces New Ideas.
Yeah, I'm Fresh Faces New Ideas. I co-moderate these things. I might be co-moderating the one tomorrow. We'll see how my work schedule works out. But I stream politics. I can't give you times anymore because that might be changing, but normally it's at night around 7:30 p.m. EST, usually 2 to 3 times a week. And I'm pretty easy to talk to. It's on twitch.tv/Fresh Faces New Ideas, and it's on Twitter at Faces Ideas.
All right. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to go down to Connor Hallbleib.
Hello, everyone. My name is Connor Hallbleib. I am actually currently the Democratic candidate for U.S. Congress in Kentucky's 5th Congressional District. So I'm coming at this from the candidate's point of view. You can find me mostly on Twitter at Connor, CONOR _Hallbleib, HALBLEIB, or my website is connorhallbleib.com. And I'm excited to join in this debate and this discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Greg, you are next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Greg Arias. I am from Pomona, California. My pronouns are they, them. I am the host of Let's Talk, which is a progressive YouTube show where we talk about just everyday topics and sometimes bring in everyday news. And I am a young progressive, like I mentioned with my show. I've been involved with politics since in high school, so about 2013. And yeah, I'm so excited to be on this panel. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go over to Biggs.
Yeah, I'm Biggs. I am a streamer sometimes, a father of 3, a husband. I'm kind of like a middle of the road libertarian, I guess. I understand a lot of what the left is trying to do, a lot of what the right's trying to do. I try to come at things from a practical standpoint and just try to have the best conversations we can have to try to make the changes we want to see. You can find me at Biggs8500 on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube.
Perfect. And finally, over to Critical Canadian.
Hell yeah. Last but not least. I'm Critical Canadian. I do kind of whatever I want on Twitch. We sometimes talk politics. We talk life. We give advice. We review stuff. We kind of meme. We smoke weed, play games, all that fun stuff. So you can find me at twitch.tv/Critical Canadian, or more recently, just at my YouTube channel, Critical Canadian. So yeah, awesome. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. We're going to start off with the conversation, jump right in. So it's going to set the stage just right away. I'm sure most people who are watching this are pretty familiar with what exactly is going on in Florida with this legislation. People have been talking about this bill for the last several weeks, pretty consistently in the news. So the first thing I want to ask the panel is, do you agree with this legislation? And, with children under 4th grade not being able to learn about sexual orientation or gender identity, which seems to be the basis of this Don't Say Gay bill. We're going to have everyone do their intro statements. And after that, we're going to go into an open panel. We're going to go in reverse order. So I'm going to start with Critical Canadian. What is your take on this bill? And do you think that it's an okay piece of legislation?
No, I think it's kind of, I think it's a little bit cringe. I think from both the censorship of topics kind of standpoint, it's a little bit, I think it's a little bit yikes. I don't think these topics are so scary that we need to stop kids from learning or talking about it. Just from a parental kind of control standpoint, it's a little bit questionable in my opinion. I think we extend a certain amount of bodily autonomy to young kids and teenagers, and as they grow, we kind of extend that bodily autonomy. I think learning things about sexual orientation and gender, I don't think really violates that. And I think is really good to kind of put into perspectives, maybe some of the ideas that people have about gender and sexual orientation, because these are things that these kids are going to go through later in life. And I think when you give kids the foundation to build upon that later in life, I think it's really important. So I think both of these kind of run counter intuitive to it. It seems like they already have legislation when it comes to teaching kids about sexual education until grade 4 anyway. So this bill just kind of seems like if you want to call it the government overreach for my brothers in arms. So yeah, that's pretty much all I got. I'm excited to see who's for and against it. So
All right, next we're gonna go down to Biggs.
Yeah, so I do agree a little bit with what you're saying there, Critical Canadian. I do think that the bill is a little bit cringe as far as what maybe the ulterior motives are. But as far as what the actual bill says, the majority of this bill is actually more about parental rights, and the fact that everybody's focusing on this one little like subsection of the bill, which is fine because that's what people are most concerned about and upset about, right? But I just think it's kind of silly to be fighting something that's just so obvious that we have so many other issues in the education system, especially at teaching kids at such a young age of these core things like reading and math. I don't think there's any need to have any other, especially curriculum oriented discussions about things like sexuality or gender at all. I think that we need to focus on the actual like learning how to learn, critical thinking, things like that. I think the social issues can definitely be saved much later on, especially I don't know what everybody here's experiences with we're in school as far as like sexual education. I believe most in America do it around 5th grade. I think that's a more reasonable time to have these conversations, and I'm not opposed to having these conversations with gender identity and stuff like that at that point. But I think having teachers talk to kids about this at such a young age, I just think it's just adding more things for them to get hung up on when they should be focusing on the reading, the math, the science, stuff like that. So that's basically my gist.
All right, next we're going to go over to Greg.
Yeah, I think this bill's bullshit. Because one, I know there's a lot of fear when it comes from the parents because they don't want their kids, learning about 1 second.
Technical difficulties.
Sorry, yeah, that my lips went off. Yeah, so I think it's a lot of fear mongering when it comes from the right, trying to scare right leaning parents because they know that any talk of gay might turn their kids gay, which is bullshit. Because as someone who is gay and non-binary, between the ages of 0 and like I want to say like 9. I did not have any influence when it comes to anything LGBTQI plus. Look what happened. So I think, like there's that. That's just another tactic for the right. Also, teaching sexual orientation and gender identity isn't inappropriate, even at in kindergarten. I don't think it is either. I am an after-school teacher. And the first day that I saw my students, I told them who I was and what my pronouns were. And in fact, I turned it into an English lesson because pronouns are what? English. So I don't think it's inappropriate at all. It's definitely part of the curriculum because, you kind of learn people's pronouns. And also, the adults in their lives are not going to be straight, always straight, or cisgendered. They're not. They're going to be other kinds of people, and you need to be able to have that conversation with the child because then they understand when they meet another person like that. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you for your opening statement. Next over to Connor.
Yeah, so I think that this bill is wrong. I do not believe in this bill. I do not believe in its stated purposes. I think that it was designed by a person or by a group that is trying to get everyone riled up. It's done a good job of that. It may even be an unconstitutional bill, and I think that members of the Florida legislature and the governor of Florida know that it may be unconstitutional, and they don't care. I think the teaching of gender identity and the teaching of sexual identity is important at any age. Children are much more able to understand these things than we give them credit for. The fact that the bill is so vague in certain parts is really designed to scare teachers and really designed to scare people who are trying to do the right thing and feel, do not have the amount of power to go through lawsuits. So this bill, I think, is vague. I think it's inappropriate, and I think it does more harm than good.
All right. And finally, up to Fresh Faces, New Ideas.
Look, the vagueness is kind of the point. I think there are, like Biggs mentioned, there are other points of this bill that might be that are worth discussing. If now it's been a while since, but I haven't read the update. I don't actually remember which part of this amendment passed. I do know originally there was an amendment that basically said the school had to out the kid. And I know that there was a push to have it so that even if the child was in danger, they had to out them anyway. And I don't remember if that got passed or not. So I'm being very clear. It's been a while since I've read this specific aspect of the bill. As for the vagueness, this is kind of similar to the enforcement mechanism used with the abortion bills, because they're not designed to be carried out by the government. And the reason they're used that way is because they know they're not accurate. That's why the enforcement mechanism is people suing the school, not the government doing something, because that way you can't actually bring the bill to court because there's no entity to sue generally, like in the same way that the abortion bills. As for teaching students this, look, a lot of this kind of rolls into a bunch of other things. It's this idea that if we're teaching kids about this, we're immediately going to sex. Like, no, you can explain a lot of intro concepts to small children. It's literally the foundation of our education system. Like, you don't pretend that a child is learning nuclear physics and astrophysics because you're teaching them basic math. Like, you can tell a kindergartner, hey, Billy has two mommies, because that's just how it is. He has two mommies. Not everyone has two parents, or a male and a female parent, or something like that. It's very simple to do this. Like, the more sinister part to this is the fact that it's is how fast they flipped from like making something where they could potentially make some type of argument to everybody who is against this bill is a groomer, and now all of homosexuality is groomers. That's where it's coming, and they flipped on that in like a week. And that's where the more serious issues come from, because like this is simultaneously happening. They're pretending this, and they're ignoring like the Tennessee bill, the HB 233, which removes the age of consent for all marriage. So like we're not even like let's not pretend that they actually give a shit about this. A lot of this stuff, a lot of their arguments in defense of this are really disingenuous, and their enforcement mechanism is a problem. And that's how you kind of know that these bills are bullshit, because that's of that type of enforcement mechanism.
Okay, so thank you for everyone for your opening statements. Now we're going to open it up to the full panel. Anyone can answer each other's opening statements. Yeah, feel free to go ahead.
Do you want us to raise hands? Do you want us to just speak in? What do you want?
Go ahead and just speak in.
Okay, Biggs, I'm kind of curious. Do you think they should not be teaching any gender identity, like he or she as well, like keep things as gender neutral as they can, just with the...
I mean, I think that as far as like having curriculum specifically talking about these type of things, I think that's the part that's inappropriate. I think that having things like language, obviously, as Greg said, there's gendered in languages. But my issue with it is that, and again, to what Fresh Faces was saying, they're trying to like drum up all this, hate for it or whatever, but it actually does the same thing about cisgender stuff and about traditional, what I'm not religious, but like religious traditional marriage. Like, I feel the same way about this as I feel with like not wanting to have my children indoctrinated by religious views. The same type of thing for me personally is like, I don't want ideologies and things like that being taught to my children. I want them to be being taught the basic way, like the math, the science, that stuff. Like, it's okay to add that later on, but I just think at this age we're failing so much as a society with the education system, especially at these young children's ages. They're not meeting the requirements. We keep having to dumb down the requirements to move children on in grades and stuff like that, and it's silly. And I agree, like these things are important issues, but to say that they're more important than just getting the basics, education to children, I think that's where it's a stretch for me.
Well, I don't know if
jump in.
Oh, Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think that this issue is way more important than getting basic curriculum into our children, because you're right. I see in my kids that I teach, they are struggling with English and math and such. But it's not ideology. It's fact. Sexual orientation is scientific fact. Gender identity is scientific fact. So when you are teaching sexual
these are
orientation,
social issues. These are social. You guys say all the time that gender is a social construct. How can you deny that? That's literally the argument that they stand upon.
Gender identity is
that's what we're talking about.
Okay, gender itself is a social construct, but gender identity for an actual person is real.
Oh yeah, it's definitely real.
But there you go. But it's fact. There you go. It's not an ideology.
It's still a social issue, and it's an ideological issue. Just because you identify as something that is true doesn't mean that that's not built on a social system, as you guys say. And I agree with that.
We teach other social issues in.
Yeah,
I know, but I'm saying is at a young age, there's no need for that at this age for children. I mean, I think that's the problem where people and like what Fresh Faces said is like why they are so concerned about this and the pushback from it. Because to me, when you guys push back against this type of thing, it seems like you guys are for, having sexual conversations with children at this young age. And some people don't find that appropriate, regardless of whether it's a teacher, whether it's a friend, whether it's anything. Like most parents don't want anybody aside from them at this age discussing these type of issues with them. Now, when it comes to sex education in schools,
but they are literally the same age seeing heterosexual stuff being thrown at them at any age. You see them, two parents kissing on television,
but they're not. But that shouldn't be part of a school curriculum either. And I agree with that too. Like there shouldn't be anything about this. And I understand that because from your perspective, because it's been the norm, it seems like it's like, oh, they throw it in these kids' faces. But I don't think it should be taught as an educational thing. It just so happens that a lot of things that they show may have that, and I'm fine with that. But to have actual curriculum built around this and taking away from the curriculum time of the basics, I think is just absurd. And I think it's just a poor argument. And I don't care about how people want to live their lives. It's just not, to me personally, is not a value that I want to instill at kids at this age. Now, when they get older and they can understand, like in middle school or the before fifth grade or whatever, when you start having sex education classes, that's when you can have these conversations. That's when the children are more able to understand. And I agree, critical what you said earlier about like kids can understand more than we give them credit for. And I agree. But the problem is that they have so much stuff coming in, being able to sort all that stuff out is what becomes the problem. And when you're trying to get them to learn these basics, when you add more things to it, it makes all of it more muddled.
But we need, the thing is, we need to start at the basics, right? Like when we go teach history, we don't teach all of the history right up, right? We might take segments of it that kids can understand, break it down in a way that they can digest, that is like a very basic building block that will later then build on other things, right? Nobody's saying you have to take this big, nebulous concept of gender and explain it right at kindergarten, right at grade 1, as it is today, right? As we as adults kind of talk about it on these panels and stuff. What you can do is very condense it down in a way that kids can digest it. Way that I've done it as a father, right, is I've gone to my child and say, hey, you see boys and girls, right? Yeah. Do you think a boy could become a girl if they dressed and looked like one and you couldn't tell the difference? That honestly,
why would you bring that up to your child just out of the
why
blue?
not?
That seems strange.
Why not?
I don't know. I'm just curious. Yeah. I just don't. I wouldn't personally do if my child. See, I mean, maybe that's just my differing parenting style. I don't try to put stuff on my kids. When my kids come to me, I answer their questions. I try to explain things to them, but I'm not going to go out of the blue and say, can a boy become a girl? Like that's.
Let me jump in here really quickly, just for the sake of clarification. I think Biggs, this is actually a common thing that comes up when we're having conversations from both perspectives on this. Is what you just said was it seems strange to you, and I think that inherently, right there, that sentence is essentially, I think, what's trying to be overcome is the fact that there are so many people who feel marginalized in the country, who feel as though their way of life is considered to be strange, right? It's considered to be different. It's considered to be, that unnecessary in some form or fashion. But I think the whole goal is to try to normalize something that has felt so strange for so long. At least that's what I am observing through my personal perspective.
Can I just point out something? I didn't say that I brought it up to him beforehand. I said that's how I explained it to him. Right when that question came up, when he saw,
maybe I misunderstood what you were
Yeah,
saying. I'm
and
sorry,
and
but that's
even
what it
still-
sounded like to me.
but even still, there might be topics that come up in conversation unnaturally that I make my child aware of. Right? If I have long hair and he goes, "Daddy, you look like a girl," and I go, "Is there anything wrong with Daddy looking like a girl? Is that something that's wrong?" And he goes, "Well, I don't really know." And it's like, okay, well, Daddy feels
Yeah,
not very strict.
Yeah, and I agree in that case. Like, obviously, like that's why I preface that by saying, like,
So-
if your children is asking you questions, I completely understand that. But to me, when you said it, it made it sound like you were bringing it up to them. Like that's what I have I
Okay.
don't want anybody bringing that kind of stuff up to my children. This doesn't.
I have one more question. Sorry.
ahead.
What is the harm of bringing it up and explaining it when they ask, when both explanations are going to be the same?
So why would you bring up anything to a child if it had nothing to do with anything that they were talking about?
Why would I go to teach my kids something new that they haven't asked, right? Like woodworking, car repair, cooking, cleaning. Why would I teach my kid any of that stuff?
So
Because I
those
think
are
it's-
actually like all the things you listed are actually like utility skills, not an ideology, not a philosophical thing. And I agree.
So-
that is your argument is valid. That was like, why do we teach kids anything? But what I'm saying is that we need to teach kids the basics. Even before like you learn about history and stuff, you have to learn how to read and do math and write. Like those are very important skills. And this is the age that we're talking about.
So one of the skills that I actually teach my child as I bring up topics that he might not bring up to me is empathizing with how other people might be or how other people might appear before those conversations come in maybe a really awkward time. It could be that me having the conversation at home before he even brings it up is actually super beneficial for when the situation arrives and we're maybe in a little bit more of a sensitive area, right? That's
So
how
why
I
would
avoid...
you? Okay, continue.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't
Yeah,
mean to
no,
interrupt you.
go ahead. Go ask your question.
Well, I was going to say, so you say that, so you bring up these specific issues about like, transgender or whatever might be the case, right? Is that what you're saying? Just it could be anything, right?
Could be anything. Yeah.
Right. So why would you preface these things about those specific topics when you could just focus on like just being kind in general, being nice to everybody, accepting everyone for their differences, whether it's gender, whether it's, a disability, because I work with disabled children and adults a lot. So I have those same type of things, but there's no reason to focus on a specific thing when you can just say, especially if you want to have it be like better for society, you want them to treat everybody better, right? So the fact that you want to focus on these things, and again, I agree, these people may feel like it may actually be being marginalized. I mean, we see it all the time. So I understand wanting to have that empathy for these specific plights that people have, especially because society has, like you said, and I even said it myself, it seems strange, but like, I just think that why not just have it be more inclusive? Because that's what we always try to talk about is more inclusivity than focusing on these things that you seem to want to push specifically on younger children.
Okay, really quickly here. Fresh Faces Connor, feel free to jump in if you want to. We've been having the conversation based on the left side of the screen here. So if you got something, go ahead and just jump in anytime.
Yeah, sorry, I'm dealing with this like lunatic in my chat. No, look, I think Biggs actually has a really good point, and I do think that this is part of the reasoning that the messaging around this bill is like so harmful. He is right that technically under this bill, you should not be able to explain like a heterosexual relationship. And this is one of the things that I've referred to when I've talked about this bill, is that a person should sue a school if this bill is a challenge to the courts and stopped for that exact reason, to make a point. Like just to make the point that this is not this. The reasoning that the issue I have with it is that it's how they're messaging this bill. Like if you want to argue about, maybe you shouldn't teach this in schools and stuff, I think a lot of this comes down to the fact that it's like a basic thing that you go to school to learn. Like you don't just go to school to learn like math and science and reading. Part of it is to interact with other people and to learn how to grow.
Right. And sorry, I just wanted to jump in real quick. If we break this down into two sections, the kindergarten to third grade, complete prohibition, and then the fourth grade to eighth grade or whatever, age appropriateness. I think that's how we should look at this. I mean, like, can you read to a bunch of eighth graders Romeo and Juliet, and there's ideas of gender and sexuality and identity in something like that, or maybe an English teacher might feel that may be inappropriate. What about looking at art that maybe depicts, if you're in an art class that depicts two men in a loving embrace or something, is that a, now you're trying to solve a problem that never existed, and now you're putting fear into people trying to expand children's minds and make them think about things in a little bit different way. And you don't have to do everything. So you're not showing them pornography or anything like that, but you're making people question, putting wrinkles in their brain and making them think about things that they haven't thought before. But now teachers are afraid to do that because they're afraid they're going to get sued.
And it's also like the other thing to it is these bills, because of their vagueness, it's hard to like for teachers to figure out what is acceptable, because a lot of this stuff, like the thing is, they're like, oh well,
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with what you guys you keep saying about this vagueness. I mean, it seems pretty clear. It just says they don't want any school curriculum built specifically around gender orientation or sexual or gender identity or sexual orientation. Huh?
Is that an issue?
It seems to be that people are, actually doing that into their curriculums. Yes. Like there are teachers in the states, not just Florida, but other states as well, that have been having this type of, debate and discussions in their classrooms at this age. I mean, Greg admitted it in their opening statement about it. I mean, it seems silly
but even when you're talking about this, like this is where we have to draw the dividing line on this. What is, like, how far do you think they're going? Because like Greg talked about, and like I kind of introed in, just because you're bringing this up to children, you can teach it to a child in a non-specific way. Too often the way that it is like portrayed as in the negative is you're teaching them about a sexual relationship right off the bat, when that's just like, you don't have to. Like, too much of this seems to be built on the idea that we don't build in basics prior to that. Like, I have no problem with teaching things that are age appropriate, but recognizing that, like, telling a child that that Billy has two moms, or maybe that child has two moms, and saying, hey, how come I have two moms and Billy doesn't have two moms, doesn't lead to that child becoming groomed, or doesn't lead to like that child becoming gay, or isn't like an explicitly
I'm
sexual
not
thing.
I'm not saying,
right,
I'm not making that argument.
But that's what the argument against this type of stuff is too often being.
They are concerned that may happen, and it may be a possibility, and they are concerned because people that are pushing against this, I guess it would be the way to say it.
Well,
they feel like, to me, when somebody's pushing against this, it feels like to me that they want to, put these ideas into kids' heads at this young age. And to me, I just don't think that that's something that's reasonable when we need to be focusing on what we're already failing at. It's like, why would you add more things to something that's already having issues? It just seems, just from a logical and like a pragmatic perspective, it just seems like it's not like the benefits of society. Like, why not fix things and add more curriculums that we need, like I said, instead of having these other things to add to what children are still already trying to sort stuff out. Like, I just don't think that they're trying to sort
a lot of stuff out. Like,
right, exactly. So why would you?
Going to jump in here really quick, everyone. I just want to mention that I think I had just recently watched a video that was done by the Tampa Bay Times. I think I sent this video to everyone prior.
Yeah, I did watch it. It was like 2 minutes.
In the video, they had referenced the fact that while they were researching this bill in order to report on it, that Republicans in the state legislature in Florida had conceded the fact that this was actually, that teaching of gender identity and sexual orientation was not currently happening in kindergarten through third grade. So they weren't addressing an issue that they felt was before them. They called it a preventative thing. So truthfully, it feels like the virtuous of the virtue signals on the Republicans' part, right? Like they weren't actually, hearing a bunch of parents coming to them complaining about an issue. They seem to just do this proactively, even though it wasn't happening anyway. So it feels as though the ultimate of the stirring of the pot, right? So to say that, they were, out there trying to do something, they were trying to correct something. They weren't trying to correct anything, really. They were essentially trying to create controversy, and just in my personal opinion.
And again, I found it interesting that video only focused on that one small part, when the actual majority of the bill was about the parental rights, which were happening.
And we're going to get to that in the next topic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I didn't mean to segue already. But yeah. So I just think that, like you said, I want everybody to feel comfortable talking about whatever they want to talk about, but I just don't think it's appropriate for kids at that age, especially, without being told, without the parents, being notified and things like that. Like, I don't know. I just feel like as a parent of 3 daughters, I don't want anybody talking about that kind of stuff with my children, or religion, or any type of thing like that I feel is a more social issue, or something that I should be explaining to my children one-on-one.
Should a social studies class in second or third grade mention the fact that there are the founding fathers were Christians, or that Muslims exist there's a huge Muslim population?
I think there's
in
a
certain part of
difference
the world?
between just stating the facts of history. I think that's reasonable. I think it would be even reasonable saying that, like, if you have a famous person in history that maybe have been transgender, or may have been homosexual, or whatever it might be, like, I'm perfectly fine with that. But like, the issue isn't like,
but I don't know if the teacher can say that. I don't know.
They can. Yes, they can.
Within this bill, if that can even be discussed.
Yes, it can. If you look at the bill.
Well, can I jump in real quick? Sexual orientation and gender identity is in almost every subject. You mentioned that, why are you, forcing these kids to learn extra stuff when they can't even get their reading and writing done? Well, when I explain to my kids about my pronouns and my gender identity, and when we had that pronoun lesson, guess what? They were better with their pronouns. They actually knew when to use I, he, him, she, hers, they, them. They were able to actually understand that, and actually got better with their writing. So that's just something to put out there. It's already embedded in our education system. Especially gender identity. It's in our English, it's in our social studies class. You mentioned just right now, if there was a prominent figure who happened to be homosexual. Okay, and then you then have to explain what homosexuality is. Just like when you say, when Christian settlers wanted to go to the New World, you have to explain what Christianity is and why they are running away from religious persecution.
Yeah, there's nothing is in a vacuum, and kids again understand this stuff, and there's not been a problem in Florida of an overarching group of teachers trying to groom children, and there hasn't been an overarching issue of teachers trying to turn kids gay or anything like that. This is an attention-seeking bill. This is a bill that was designed to seek attention and to cause as much chaos and turmoil as it possibly could. And I think we have to understand that this is why the bill was put into place. It wasn't put into place to solve any problem that is happening, or even to preempt any problem that could happen.
Okay.
We also see that from like the backlash too, like that they've gone with how fast they've gone. They've gone after like the flip from as soon as that his press secretary said the groomer line, you saw how fast they flipped. I mean, that was like 2 weeks ago. And now we're talking, and now conservatives are telling you that Disney is woke and coming for your children. I mean, Ben Shapiro is like one of the paragons of right wing thought. He put out a video talking about the LGBTQ stuff in Disney. And look, I truly hate
Did you see that video, the VP or whatever, one of the departments?
I was
Disney?
watching. I saw what Christopher Rufo posted.
So I mean, that doesn't seem like that much of a stretch, really. When they have the one of the VP saying about having
and it was like a tongue in cheek
50%, sure.
But hold on. But like, to be clear, like a lot of what they were showing, especially the clips that they're using to show that there's like some evil agenda, is essentially them saying like, hey, we need to like have a little bit more representation. Like that's what a lot of the pushback they're pushing is the fact that there's representation. Like when we're talking about like massive corporations that are suddenly going woke, we're talking about like Disney putting a side character in Upward. Now, to be fair, I've not seen Upward. I haven't seen like I haven't seen a Disney movie since like Toy Story 4. So I I haven't seen like to pretend that that's like suddenly a woke movie because they have like these like side characters, which they're specifically side characters, so that when they like release them in like countries that are more homophobic, they can remove them.
Yeah.
So it's not like these are suddenly like it is suddenly like the all gay people are accepted type thing. Like the push for this type of stuff, like as soon as they made this about like grooming versus not grooming, they made this bill so much worse on a messaging standpoint. And they started rolling a ball, whether intentionally or unintentionally, that is going to cause a whole lot more damage to a larger subset of people that just like got elevated recently. It's not like we're not. That's where the real issue. Like this bill in itself is kind of goofy. I don't think ultimately it would stand for very long. I don't think there's gonna be like a lot of backlash to like in the courts for it. I think the other conversation that they started because of his press secretary and the immediate way that they win is much more dangerous.
Okay, before we go any further, I will allow everyone to have a closing statement if they want one. We're about to transition to our next topic. I know Critical, you wanted to jump in here. Do you want to go ahead and get in one?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Biggs, in like a hypothetical world where the school system was running perfectly, everybody was getting through the grades like they should, would you want this stuff being taught then as a social issue to kids?
So in my hypothetical perfect world, we would have school of choice, and you'd be able to send your kids where you could have whatever control over the curriculum you wanted, and I could send my kids wherever I wanted to with the curriculum that I wanted, and then you could have the whatever ideologies taught if that's what you wanted. I think Christian parents should be able to send their kids to their Christian schools. Like that's what would be ideal for me. But again, in this society that we live in now with how it's set up, I think that whenever you have something that's like, especially government run, like the school systems, I think you should keep all these type of ideological things out. And again, I know you guys don't agree with my term ideological, but that's just my personal view of it.
Okay, well, let's just keep all the same school systems the same. It's the same. Your kids are going to the same school, but now it's like everybody's passing. Would you be okay with this being taught then?
What? No.
Okay, well then
if all the requirements were met and we had a good system and we had room to fit in a curriculum course, I would be much more understanding of it. Yes.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Okay,
not directly related. This is kind of an offshoot of this. Part of your thing with like people should go to schools that they want. Part of the problem with that is
can I specify though, if it was set up like how it is for like sex education now, where they have to like send a form home to the parents as well. I think that's
right. I actually have an offshoot of this because I think this solves like an actual problem. So there is no universal curriculum for sex education, and they're like it varies from town to town. So like one town will teach abstinence only, and one town will teach other
It's by school board usually.
I think that there should be every school should have a mandated 2-tier track where you have the option of whether or not they teach abstinence only, and if there's like the rest of the stuff. Like I think that would be the best way to solve this type of thing, and I think that is kind of how we should look at these type of issues. Especially, but I think a lot of it when it comes down to this bill is they're correlating all gender identity and sexual orientation together to like the most extreme examples, and I think that is where the biggest issue lies for this bill.
All right, Connor and Greg, do either of you have a closing statement? If not, we're going to move to the next topic.
Yeah, I've got a quick closing statement. So I would say that this bill is trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist, and it does more harm than good. You have students in Florida schools, from kindergarten through high school, who are trying to understand themselves and trying to understand where they fit in the world, and having a bill that basically says if you discuss that's wrong, makes them feel lower than what the norm is. And I think that this bill, I think it's an attention seeker, but I also think it's going to do a lot of harm to a lot of young people.
All right, and Greg?
Yeah, I would have to just echo what Connor just said. It's going to do more harm than good. It's going to be a danger to our kids because, I can say as early as age 5, I knew I was different. I knew that my attraction to boys was different, and I knew that me not feeling like a boy was different at age 5. And so when you add this to what I'm feeling at the time, yeah, that's going to really fuck up a kid. So, and also, like I said, gender identity, me being non-binary is not an ideology. It's a fact.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your statements. We're going to transition to our next topic. So considering, this move that we are talking about here with this bill in Florida, as well as other bills that we've been seeing around the country right now, including the one in Texas, where they are essentially saying that, if parents allow their children to, transition, that they could be essentially accused or prosecuted for harming their children, banning trans kids from sports across the country. Is the Republican Party, out there making this country more dangerous for young children who are LGBTQ plus? That is the topic of this particular question here. We're going to start in reverse with Fresh Faces, New Ideas. Why don't you go ahead and start us off here? Do you believe the GOP is putting young LGBTQ kids at harm across the country?
Yes. Yeah, this is not only me agreeing. This is the Republican governor of Utah agreeing to this. So in Utah, there's two separate bills that I think that every single person who wrote that bill or pushed for it should immediately go to jail. One is the Tennessee HB 233, which allows basically to say that Oglesville doesn't matter, that you can have a straight marriage, and that has to be recognized. And if you sue because you believe that somebody is threatening is illegally taking away your rights, which is a thing that Kentucky just proved, the state has to defend it. But it also in that bill removes the age of consent for marriage, and they recognize that, and they kill all the amendments to put that in. That just seems like a pedophile bill in itself. The second bill is this Utah trans bill. There are currently 75,000 high school athletes in Utah. There are 4 of them that is transgender. There is 1 child who is a female playing male playing as a female. 1 child that is 75,000. They wrote an entire bill directly. It is a state-sponsored bullying bill of a single child. I think everyone who wrote that bill deserves to go to jail. The governor of Utah directly vetoed this, and in their statement said, "I've never seen so much anger aimed at such a small group of people when we have," and then he posted the numbers. It's like 85% of them attempt suicide, 55% of them complete it because they're just not recognized. There is 1 child in there. And in Texas, they're absolutely putting them in danger. These are children who they basically said, if you are giving your child medicine, which, to be clear, there are side effects, there are some negative side effects to this medicine. They're still researching that. And I like any doctor who is prescribing this without talking about that is not doing their job also. But saying that is child abuse, or that we're talking about like 4-year-olds getting chemical castration, is objectively going to cause harm. And so, yeah, I mean, it is inexplicable to say that they are not causing harm. It is like mind blowing how outrightly cruel some of these bills are.
Okay, thank you for that. Next, we're gonna go down to Connor.
So the Republican Party for the last 50 years or so is a white male party, and it's a party just is designed to hold on to as much power as it can for itself. And that means that it used to be African Americans, it used to be homosexuals, and now it's turned to transgenders. They're always going to target a group to rile people up and foment as much hate and foment as much fear. Fear is the real driving force here. Fear that they can. They don't care if they put anyone in danger. They don't care that they're absolutely putting vulnerable people in danger of suicide, or danger of social isolation, or isolation within their communities. The Republican Party is a diseased party. In that disease means that, yes, they are a danger to anyone who does not look like them, or anyone who is not fit into their mold. I think the Republican Party is an evil institution. As a Democrat, I have a lot of criticism with the Democratic Party, and I'm not afraid to say those criticisms. But as an institution, the Republican Party is a diseased institution.
Okay, and next we're gonna go over to Greg.
Of course it is. Of course, like, no brainer. But I want to also use this opportunity, and Connor, thank you for bringing it up. The Democrats are just as bad when it comes to LGBTQIA plus issues in the past. We had it when in the women's movement, where they had a debate whether lesbians or transgender women should be part of the movement. And unfortunately, like you still have those people today, but now they're more just right leaning people. And then you had it also in the Clinton administration during the great AIDS crisis, which wouldn't even mention that it was happening. Of course, they were doing research, but they never really spoke about the AIDS movement. And then, of course, back to the GOP, Reagan was just absolutely terrible when it came to the AIDS epidemic. And so, yeah, there is this history of the GOP being terrible to LGBTQIA plus people, no doubt about it. But we also need to call out the Democrats because, I want to say just until like probably 2010, it became more mainstream for a Democrat to be pro LGBTQI plus.
Okay, thank you. Next, we're going to go over to Biggs.
Yeah, so I'm actually gonna have to go ahead and agree with everybody on this one. I'm actually not a big fan of the Republicans myself either, for the most part. I think a lot of these bills are just garbage. Same thing with a lot of the abortion bills, especially Texas. They seem to be a repeat offender when it comes to this stuff. But my biggest thing is I just want people to be free to do what they want to do for the most part and like have the least amount of government influence as possible. So I don't agree with a lot of what the Republicans do. And I'm so glad that we've had multiple people already say about how, the Democrats are basically the same way. When we talk about people making stuff, unsafe for people, you look at, the Republicans with these type of bills that are, just blatantly targeting just, silly things that just don't even need to be brought up. And I'm glad, I think the governor of Utah, like you said, and I believe the governor of Indiana also vetoed that bill there as well, I'm pretty sure. So that's pretty cool. We have some Republican governors saying, hey, this isn't good. I like to support those type of people because they kind of lean more the more, I guess, small L, Republican adjacent libertarian types like me. But then you look at things like, inner cities and stuff run by Democrats. You see Democrats constantly dropping the ball when it comes to minorities and stuff like that, the crime rates and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's not just the Republicans. It really is both parties. And I'm glad that we kind of agree on that. And it's nice to see both sides kind of calling out the BS,
All right. And finally, Critical Canadian.
Yeah, I kind of wondered what you meant by when you said harm. Do I think like a lot of bills are going to create like outward violence towards trans and LGBTQ people? I don't know. I think that probably remains to be seen. Do I think it weakens a lot of the support systems that LGBTQ people have? Yeah, for sure. I don't know, like from an outsider looking in as a Canadian, I feel uniquely able to talk about your American politics. But I'm kind of curious. Sorry, I did have a question in mind. And I understand we kind of both sides it with Greg going the Democrats and the GOP. I think from an outsider looking in, your Democrats are way ahead of where the GOP is. So while you might be able to call out like Democrats in the past for like the shit they did, I think at today's standards, I think we do need to appreciate that you at least have somebody in your country that is willing to fight against like the garbage bills that you see your GOP pushing. So I don't know what we're really going to disagree with at this topic, but yeah, I don't really have much more to say about it.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. We're going to start with our open panel here. So what exactly do you think is actually going to be the outcome of all of this? Obviously the Republicans, seem to have quote unquote like an agenda here. They have been making LGBTQ issues, they're putting it right at the forefront of this 2022 election cycle. I mean, what exactly do we think that they're trying to do here? And is this going to, I guess, inexplicably have more harm than we could probably think of right now for all these young kids who are going to be experiencing the effects of these bills?
Well, let me just start off as someone who's running a campaign. So, the Republicans, when I say they're evil and say they're psychotic, they don't really care, especially the people at the top, don't really care about this issue, really. And that means that they could, if it harms people, it harms people. They don't really care. What this is designed to do is rile up and foment a group of voters who wouldn't actually vote for the Republicans' real concerns, including tax breaks and corporate welfare. And so it riles up people enough to where they get out and they vote for the Republicans' real issues. And so that's what this stuff does. It foments and it creates anger and fear in people who the Republicans need to get out and vote for them. So I don't know if any of these bills will stay. I don't think the Republicans even care if they'll stay or not, but it creates enough attention for them that they can get them to vote for the issues that the Republicans really care about.
I also wanted to add, it was mentioned, that the Utah governor ended up vetoing that bill, and he brought up all the statistics and all that. Yeah, great. A Republican did that, but that's bare minimum shit. You should be doing that already. So I'm really tired of also celebrating Republicans for doing bare minimum shit. You're supposed to fucking care about fucking kids.
Well, also, I want to I don't know how many you've read this statement to him. Like the part of the reason that statement I thought was like especially good is because there's two things. One, he directly pointed out that the fact that this is like essentially not an issue, and that and he pointed out like the actual detriment. But he also pointed out that like, hey, look, I'm aware that me doing this is a political liability for me. Like I'm aware, like Kristi Noem and all of them, they fucking signed the bill. They don't give a shit. He's like, look. I'm trying to do my best. It's like this bill is a bad bill, and politically signing this bill, vetoing this bill is a problem. Like we've seen some of the attack. I imagine the attacks that he's going to receive. I don't remember who actually the governor of Utah is.
Spencer Cox.
Okay. He's going to receive are probably similar to what Greg Abbott received. Like to be clear, Greg Abbott stomped everybody in that race. And one of the things that people forget about that was one of his opponents argued that he was too lenient on LGBTQ rights, and that led to them removing the suicide hotline on the government website. Like these are direct, actionable things that they've done that will cause people harm. But also to Connor, like let's not also pretend that like Democrats don't use fear to help motivate voters. I think our fears are a little bit more justified. Maybe because I'm a left-leaning person, and I feel like defending democracy and the planet are a little bit more justified than Leah Thompson swimming a race or Mr. Potato Head's penis. But like it is an effective tactic to get people out. The problem is once we have power, we do absolutely dick with it. At least in the House, at least in the Senate, because Joe Manchin probably also deserves to go to jail, but that's a totally different story.
Let me just respond to that real quick. I think you made a great point that Democrats do use fear. It's obviously a very effective political tactic, but literally in the middle of COVID, when we were trying to figure out if we were going to give stimulus checks or if we were going to continue stimulus checks, vaccine issues, there's all these issues going around. What were the Republicans, what were the issues they were bringing up? They were bringing up Mr. Potato Head and Dr. Seuss. They had nothing. Their strategy is they kind of blindly kind of poke and prod at different things. It's going to be Mr. Potato Head, and then it's going to be CRT, and then it's going to be trans issues, and they just see which one works. So Democrats definitely use fear, but the Republicans, they try every issue that they possibly can, no matter how ridiculous it is, until they find the one that works.
Or can I actually bring up another point, because I think I meant to bring this up. Or they'll make one up. A lot of the people pushing the CRT stuff, like the Christopher Rufos and stuff, are also now pushing this Disney stuff, and it's just like blatantly inaccurate. First off, he's a tiny little man who has already explained that he's like making this shit up.
Rufo admitted it. He admitted that he admitted it.
And then my favorite thing is like they'll post a. So he blocked me on Twitter because he posted a flyer from one of these Minneapolis schools, and it basically was like how to protest. And I looked at the flyer. Everything in that flyer was fantastic except for a single bullet point. The first bullet point on that was basically like, hey, if you're white, you can't show up to these rallies and talk because this is not for you. And I was like, that is a terrible message. But everything else in this fucking flyer is like, wear long sleeves, have water, have a plan if you get separated from your friends, charge your phone, know your rights when you're talking to the police. Everything in that is like exactly what you wanted for that one point. And as soon as I commented on that, he fucking blocked me.
But there was bad messaging on one point, probably written by an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old. It's like, yeah, sorry, 18, 19 in college kids make mistakes, and sometimes they create flyers maybe that aren't the best messaging.
It would, yeah, but like the rest of it was great. And that's the most frustrating thing is like they post these things and they rile this stuff up when they're just like blatantly lying about this, or they have these organizations. I believe it's the Moms for Liberty is the one that is like the big one that goes to the school board meetings, and that Fox has on like a neutral arbiter, even though there's like Fox people in Moms for Liberty. That like they like rile this stuff up, and it's so frustrating because it's like so blatantly obvious that they're lying about these things because they'll like post the video. The one I saw was the one guy who in one of the Disney people. He was talking about it like, hey, we were looking at all of our trans and gay characters, and a lot of them are side characters, and we can't do like good stories about them if they're background characters. And they're like, oh, they're coming to teach your kids to educate to indoctrinate. It's like the indoctrination is that they exist. Like the most frustrating thing is like when they're whipping this fear up, it's not even like intelligent. It's like, here's a thing that I'm mad about that. And I'm going to, and this, it's like my favorite genre of nonsense is to take a clip or an article that you're blatantly showing people. And then you'll be like, here's what my thoughts on it is. And it doesn't say anything close to that.
Critical Canadian Biggs, you haven't jumped in a little bit here. Do you want to add something to the conversation here?
I honestly, I don't know what to say. I think most people are in agreement that like a lot of the bills, and it does seem to like, it seems like just looking up, there's like 200 bills that are looking to limit like LGBTQ rights and things. I guess like I just don't understand why anybody would be happy about any of like those sorts of legislations. It seems like you're trying to basically sweep just LGBTQ people or issues under the rug as like a GOP member and hoping that they don't exist, like they'll just stop existing. When in the reality, these people are still going to exist. They're going to still experience issues. They're going to have healthcare issues that are very unique to them. They're going to have mental issues that are very unique to them. You're going to have societal issues that are very unique to them. And it seems like if you actually wanted to help people, actually help your fellow countrymen, actually make their lives better, you'd be proposing legislation to the best of our scientific understanding that actually like helps to like looks to alleviate. And one of the biggest things is like legislation kind of also in a way kind of unfortunately makes it like societally okay. It's another topic for conversation, but when you feel like a lot of legislation's against you, you tend to feel that like society's against you, or that maybe your social or your like kind of your ability to find help within society is kind of lacking, which could lead to a lot of issues. So, which I don't like.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the reason why I mustard, I don't really disagree. Is my mic coming through okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't really disagree. I think that what I honestly see here is kind of two things happening. We have the social engineering by the GOP or the right or whatever you want to call it through these legislations, trying to like push these issues, and things like that. And you kind of have like social engineering from the left, kind of more in the like entertainment and things like that. And you have these two forces kind of competing against each other. But what I just don't want to see, the government coming in and telling anybody what to do anywhere in any sense of the words. I think the government should be there to protect people's rights, and I think that a lot of these bills are neglecting that just terribly. We should be protecting people's rights, not taking them away. While I don't agree with a lot of the stuff as far as like the left goes and the like the trans athletes in sports and stuff like that, I still think everybody should be able to do what they want to do. And I think having the government step in and trying to push these people out of society and trying to socially engineer these ideas on either side, I just think is wrong. And I just don't want to see it anymore.
Yeah, I think, before we transition to our next topic here, the one thing that I'll say about this is that for me, it feels like one of the Republican agendas this year is to attack this word woke, which they have coined an umbrella term to basically mean just about anything that's not straight and white. So anything that falls into that category is now considered woke, and it must be attacked. Right? When I hear Ben Shapiro, for instance, talk about wanting to create his own, children's shows for the Daily Wire because he's trying to avoid woke propaganda. Like, what exactly, like you were saying earlier, Fresh Faces, what exactly is that? It's just like having people on screen who are not straight and white for the first time in American history, and now that's a problem. It seems as though these pieces of legislation are essentially trying to attack people because they're now finally getting some levels of representation in our society. And now these bills have to be put together just to kind of put them back into a closet. I mean, is that what we're really trying to do here? So I think definitively that these legislations across the country that we're seeing are going to do incredible harm to people who are already struggling just to feel normal, who are trying to not feel like they are strange or an other or some way, form, or fashion. But with that being said, I do want to transition to our next topic here.
Desmond, can I say something real quick on
Yeah,
that?
I also have one last comment.
Yeah,
all right. Go ahead and
So
jump in.
I think that what you said is perfect. And I think that the reason that people like Ben Shapiro, that cretinous little alien, and the rest of the people, I feel like one of the reasons that they focus so much on woke culture, especially like woke commercials or something, is because it's entirely cringy. It's cringy when corporations kind of commodify real issues that are happening. They it's just it's an easy target. It's low hanging fruit. So I think as a leftist, as a progressive, as someone who really cares about these issues, I don't like to see it's just weird when you see a commercial and the people are obviously trying to make sure they have the most inclusion of all time. I mean, I don't think that's really what true progress is, but that's why I think it's just easy for them to make fun of those.
Well, also, wasn't that what Q Force was? That seemed to be pretty much pandering. But no, but the other thing to this is there's something that we don't talk enough about for legislation is there's a specific thing that you can never get back when you're in legislation, and that's time. You only have a limited amount of time and power, whether you're in the minority, the majority, whatever. For your election is coming up in 2 years, in 4 years, in 6 years. What you do with that time reflects what you believe your values are. So things like Florida passing this "Don't Say Gay" bill, or Texas doing what they're doing, they're not dealing with things like the red moss or the red algae in Florida. They're not dealing with housing prices. They're not dealing with homelessness. They're not dealing with COVID relief. They're not dealing with the fact that Florida had a fucking building just fall down like a year ago. Like, if you're spending your time generating culture war bills, you're not taking care of the people in your state and you're not fixing the problems. So like, it's really cool and it's like super awesome. Like when you get to show up on Tucker because you called out the woke media because they didn't like your bill, but people are dying or they're getting sick or their livelihoods are at stake. Like, that's a thing that we have to talk about. Like, every time you pass one of these bills, you're not doing something that's effective. Every time you pass a bill that targets one fucking trans kid, Utah is not expanding healthcare or whatever the fuck else is going on in Utah, fixing the Jazz. They suck. Anything else that's going on there.
All right. I'm going to get the last word in here before we go to our next topic here. Just to kind of piggyback off that a little bit, some of the things that were accomplished in the Florida state legislature in this past session, including passing this "Don't Say Gay" bill. They also put a ban on abortion after 15 weeks, limits on racial sensitivity training, limits on discussion of race in school, an office to investigate non-existent voter fraud, and the Stop Woke Act. But one of the things they did not pass was a bill addressing building inspections and repairs in response to that tower collapsing and killing about 100 people. So, wins all around for the Florida legislature. We're going to go to our next topic here, which is, as we kind of alluded to earlier in this, was should parents have more of a say in their children's school curriculum? So we're going to start with opening statements here again. We're going to start with our two parents on the panel. So we're going to go to my left here and start with Critical Canadian. What are your thoughts on this subject?
Oh shit, I wasn't listening. Sorry, on what subject? On the parental rights stuff?
Should parents have more of a say in their children's school curriculum?
Yeah, I think having a say in your children's curriculum is based. I actually just sat in a focus group not too long ago to have input in my kids' curriculum. I think a lot of times parents think like the curriculum or what your kids taught is like super secret and you can never find out. Yeah, honestly, you could probably just go to your local government's website. You could probably see exactly what they're teaching your kids, in what style and what they're expected to learn. I know I can, at least in my home province. I think when it gets a little bit weird is when you're looking to censor it for all other students or the entire school as a whole. I think it's fine if you want to take your kids out and maybe homeschool them or not have certain subjects taught to them, but throwing a whole school-wide school-wide solution to things like that, I think is a little cringe. So.
All right. Thank you. We're going to go down to Biggs.
Yeah, like I said before, ideally for me, I think that we should just have school of choice, and parents should be able to kind of just do what they want to do as far as like what type of curriculums they want in their children's schools. As far as like just living in the school districts now, we have the same thing like Canada has. Basically, you can go to your local school board meetings. You can they usually vote on curriculums. There's a whole bunch of things. Basically, a lot of these I don't know how much people outside of the school system know, but a lot of these curriculums are actually just like a package deal that they buy from these companies that get like accreditation and certifications from the states or whatever. So you have all these different curriculums to choose from. They package it together, boom, sell it to a school. That's what the school uses for, 3 to 5 years, depending on what their cycles are. So I think that's perfectly reasonable. What I have a problem with is, parents aren't involved enough. And I think that's what we kind of need to change as a society. I think if we're having these type of conversations with kids from the parental side, I think it just makes so much more of an impact. If you have actual parents helping their kids with their homework, actually being involved in what they're learning from all aspects. We can have things like this and like these other issues, these social issues also be taught and helped, along by the parents. And I think that everybody should be able to have whatever education they want for their children. And I think it's sad that we kind of have to all subscribe to this government one size fits all system we have currently. I would like to change that, but again, we kind of have to work within the parameters of the systems that we have. So hopefully we can, at least focus on the core issues so we don't fall too far behind, which we seem to be kind of doing now.
All right. And next we're going to go over to Connor.
So this question actually was the basically the trap question in the 2021 Virginia gubernatorial election. Basically, Terry McAuliffe, the Democrat, was kind of put into a corner and basically said that parents shouldn't have the right to to be able to have an input of what their kids are learning. I think absolutely parents should have a right, should have a very major right in determining what their kids learn. I think that the limitations on that right don't come as much from the school board, but come from the limitations of financing. If you live in an area with a school that is underfunded, you really don't have a say in what your kid learns. If you live in an area where like Biggs was saying, where a private company basically sells a school a package, you don't have a say in what that private company kind of puts in their packages. I think having more financing for schools and having schools able to not be on the brink of bankruptcy actually improves parents' abilities to have for their children what they want. If I have a child and I want that child to learn music in school, but there's probably a good chance that in a lot of public schools that child is not going to have a very good music education or music curriculum. So I think actually expanding the funding and financing for education, getting it away from property taxes, it's not determined about where you live. I think that actually gives more independence and more ability of parents to determine what their kids learn.
Okay. And next we're going to go over to Greg.
I think parents should have a say in their school's curriculum or the children's school curriculum. They have every right to. There's PTA meetings. There's going to the school board. I don't think that parents should have the right to take away things that are basically fact and not based on ideology. For example, like having a parent saying, well, I don't want my kid learning about evolution. Well, that's just too damn bad. That's scientific fact. Just because your religion says it doesn't exist, it's scientific fact. When it comes to gender identity and sexual orientation, it's fact. So yeah, your kid gets to learn it. It's not forcing ideology. It's just, this is what it is. This is what exists. That's my opinion when it comes to curriculum. But yeah, and I think parents should be more involved with their kids' schooling. For example, my mom never went to PTA meetings, never knew what was going on in my school. And I would see all these, kids' parents being involved, at the school events. And I'm just like, okay, that's cool. I wish my mom was here, When it, but that's my take on parent involvement. But when it comes to curriculum, I think yeah, they should have a right to know what's being taught to their kids, but deciding on what gets to be taught, I don't know. Like that's where I'm really iffy. I'm really iffy when it comes to this topic because I don't want parents to like take away, what is the actual fact just because their religion says so.
All right, I'm sure we'll get into that here in 1 second. Fresh Faces, New Ideas. What is your opening statement for this topic?
Yeah, you should be involved. Know what your kid does. Help your kid out with homework if you have the time. Like if you're helping your kid with homework, you're gonna know what they're learning. Because look, there's two sides to this. One, parents don't know like half of the shit that they think they did. Like if we try to if you're trying to correct your kid on like physics and shit, if I had to correct my kid on physics, I'm sorry, my kid's gonna fail the fucking class. Like there's a lot of topics like that. Like history, I think is specifically one where we have to be like very careful how the parents respond to it because it is already taught with a slant. But things like math and that are generally left alone. I think the other side to it is, what was my train of thought? There are occasionally lesson plans that teachers do, and these are the ones that you'll hear about, like the one where they pretend to auction off kids, or the ones where they do like spirit murder, where you can look at them objectively and be like, okay, this person may have meant well, this is a terrible shitty lesson plan, and we should like address that. I think that's a more reasonable response than like, hey, I need to have cameras in the classroom so I can watch what my teacher's teaching my kid at all times. Like, yeah, everyone agrees you should be more involved. I not knowing that the school districts buy them from other corporations, that seems like a problem. I tend to have a problem when we privatize things that are designed to make money. That generally doesn't have the best results, especially when we're talking about like things like, I'm pretty sure also, but I mean, to be fair, the government, like, No Child Left Behind wasn't super effective either. So, you should be more involved in your kid's life. It's if you want to be involved with it. Show up at the meetings, help your kid with your homework, run for office if you want to run for office. But like, don't pretend that you are the all-knowing person because none of us know shit. Like, especially like if I have to defer to like a teacher for a topic, I would rather defer to a teacher than me, unless I'm like actually trained in that topic.
All right,
that's where I'm at. Fresh Faces. That now I know where I'm at on this topic.
all right, so we're going to open up to the panel here a little bit. So it seems like everyone's a little in agreement about parents being involved in school's curriculum. So let me be a little more specific then. What if a group of parents decided to come to their school board and demand that they stop teaching, I don't know, but the Civil War was anything other than a war of northern aggression, or that they just don't want to have any kind of curriculum based on gender identity and sexual orientation? Let's say that actually did happen in Florida before this bill was passed, which it wasn't, but let's say it did. Should parents have that level of control over the school's curriculum if they all band together and say that they want the school to change their curriculum? Open panel.
Well, I mean, they should have the ability to band together and argue things. It just depends on what you're arguing. Like it's always possible. Like if there was like an issue, like let's say there was something like your school wasn't desegregated and that was something you demanded for your school. Like we wouldn't have a problem with that. It depends on what the issue is really. Like, but if you're going, oh, you have to teach that or evolution isn't a thing, or you have to teach that the Civil War happened in a certain way, like then that's partly why I brought up history. Or like you have to teach that everything Christopher Columbus did was fantastic and he shot rainbows out of his ass the whole time. Like it depends on the topic really. Like and obviously it's a case by case basis. So like if you're going to argue about like gender identity or something based in science, that's different than arguing like, hey, maybe this school shouldn't be desegregated.
Right. And so when I see these bills often being brought up, and especially when I hear, and I think Biggs brought on this earlier, when people talk about the idea of school choice, it seems as though parents want to have more of a say on what's in the curriculum. And so that's kind of like the heart of what I'm trying to get at here. Like, is it really better that the parents, I guess, like influence what the kids are being taught more so than the teachers who have been going to school for years to essentially craft education plans for these kids?
Well,
Where do we
Desmond,
fall on
so
that?
yeah, so I think that this issue is actually, this doesn't actually come up from a grassroots level as much as people think. I don't know if anyone remembers in the early 2000s, the whole debate was on intelligent design. And then, then we've got issues about the Civil War. And, you hear this stuff in the news, but none of this stuff is actually very grassroots. There's actually not that many examples of a group of parents getting together and saying, hey, we don't like the way that this is taught. This is most often actually financed by groups that pretend to be grassroots organizations. The Koch brothers are notorious for doing this in, different education groups. Betsy DeVos has kind of devoted her life and her billions to influencing how school boards and how school curriculum is taught. I think that every parent's got more of a right to say what their kid learns more than Betsy DeVos or the Koch brothers. So I think that this more often is, we need to be transparent on who's funding these groups and who's financing it, because again, I just don't think it's as much of, if a group of parents says, oh, we don't want the Civil War taught this way, you should look at who's funding that group, because I think that's more often the case.
Oh, I have a great question. If you have a parent that says, I don't want my kid to learn this, but you have a kid that says, you know what, I really want to learn this, who is everybody siding with in that scenario? I'd be siding probably more with the child, because there might be a reason, and that child is wanting to engage with ideas that they might not otherwise engage with. And I think that actually shows above and beyond a level of like critical thinking, that you're able to engage with an idea without accepting it. That's personally where I'm just kind of curious where everybody else would side with that.
I think this is the one. Sorry, I think real quick, I just think that this is the one thing where, like, if you think that topic will be covered later on in a curriculum, then it's fine to allow the parent to limit that. But if you think that is kind of really the only chance that the child has to know a certain thing or in the curriculum where they're going to learn it, I think that that's more of like if it's going to happen later on, they'll learn it later on. But I agree with you. I think mostly it's about the child, but we do got to just take into consideration. I think good school boards and good educators and good groups of educators think about these topics all the time. That's all they talk about.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when it comes to curriculum, it should be written by teachers and approved by teachers, period. This whole, someone mentioned that like a private company can just sell a curriculum to a school. Baffles me. I didn't know that was actually a fucking thing. And that should not be the case, period.
I mean, to be fair, those companies are usually they're actually like teachers that have done this business. It's not just like that they build it from like the constraints of like what the state, because they still have to meet the state requirements for all this stuff.
Yeah.
But it's just easier for the schools to buy these curriculums than for them to like force it upon the teacher. Now the teachers still get to like build because it's usually like a plan of action. My wife's a teacher, so I mean,
yeah. I just think that like when it comes to curriculum, like it should be written by teachers that the state had like sponsored to because if you're writing a state curriculum, it should be written by a teacher rather than a teacher funded by a private company, or I don't know, because when a private company is involved, I just feel like there's going to be some corporate bias happening, like mentioned before. And when it comes to public education, it should be written by the public.
And also, if you like send your kid to a private school and you like can't compare it, like if you send your kid to a private school and you're not paying attention, that's like kind of on you. I think my favorite example is this is like the Rufo example is the first example he used for like critical race theory was a private school in Ohio, and he's like, oh, this is in all the public schools, here's a private school doing it. It's like they're private for a reason. They're kind of separate system, so they kind of work on their own functions. So I mean that is also a thing to recognize, that it's a little different if you have like a private school, especially like if you're sending your kid to a private school, you're paying a fuck ton of money anyway, and you should sure shit be more involved. I was coaching at a local private school, and just listening to the kids talk about like what they were like doing in class, I'm like, damn, I didn't have any access to any of this. Their campus was so, it was like 10 minutes from where I live. And it was like, I live right around the corner from my high school. Like the difference is shocking. You should definitely be involved if you're in a private school.
And if any of you, I don't know when you all went to high school, but if any of you all remember like companies like College Board, and companies like that, who do you think has more control over your high school's curriculum? The local parent group or College Board? So that's what I'm saying is like, where is the power actually coming from? If we want more if we want parents to be involved more in schools, we have to kind of take the power away from companies like College Board or other companies like that.
Yeah, so I think one of the questions you asked earlier, Critical Canadian, was, should we side with like a parent or the child when it comes to a particular topic? I think very plainly, yeah, I think it just depends on what the topic is. Like if the
Yes.
topic is something that it's not controversial in any way, shape, or form, like why wouldn't you, side with the kid for wanting to learn about something?
Well, even if it was controversial, why wouldn't you want to side with the kid when the kid shows interest in learning that topic? Why would you stop them from gaining knowledge?
I guess
But if
the
it's
definition would come on what is
pro-Holocaust.
controversial, right? I guess it depends on what exactly
Mhm.
that means. That can be a very subjective term, what I just said, but yeah.
Wait, what if it's pro-Holocaust propaganda or pro-slavery stuff? Like that would be it. That would be probably something. But I mean, to be fair, the other thing with that is like some of these teaching laws are so vague that like a whole bunch of parents in Texas, there are a whole bunch of teachers in Texas are like, yeah, we have to teach them in like both directions. I mean, it's in the bills that they write too, but it's that, I mean, yeah, just playing devil advocate. Like, what if the kid is like, hey, I want to learn pro-Holocaust, or Holocaust denial. Why won't you teach me that?
Mhm.
Although I don't know how like a kid gets into that unless they're like terminally online or their parents are,
The
nuts.
Ben Shapiro alt-right pipeline, man. Come
Nick
on now.
Fuentes, they listen to Nick Fuentes.
Yeah.
Well, let's even take the LGBTQ stuff. Let's not take it to the super extreme. Let's even keep it to like the kind of topic that we centered around the LGBTQ stuff. And I'm actually more considered like curious what Biggs says, because he's kind of more the opposition in this. If your kids came to you, would you rather have the final say, or would you let your kids more engage in that kind of decision?
So for something like that, are we talking about like in a school setting again then? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, in a school setting, they go,
So-
we're going to teach this issue, and the kids,
So-
you're like, yeah, go ahead.
So to me, depending on the age of the child, I think it also depends on what, like if I knew what specifically they were talking about, if I felt it was, because to me, I'm personally not opposed to actually talking about these things with my children in general. I just don't want another person to talk about it with them. You know what I mean? Because I don't know what views they're going to hold or whatever. So even if I agree with the person, I still don't think it's right for them to say that. To me, the proper response for me is if a student came to me and I was a teacher, I would say, talk about you should probably talk about the subject with your parents. And if then the student said, hey, my parents don't want me to learn about this, then to me, I think the proper follow-up from that wouldn't be just to take the child and just talk about it with them. I think it would be then to reach out to the parents and say, hey, Jimmy said, he wants to talk about this, there might be an issue here. I just wanted to let you know, maybe open up a line of conversation so that way the parents and the teacher can form a united bond to how to discuss this with the child. I think that's way, way more just better for everybody, not only the student, but also like the trust between the parents and the teachers. So
Do you see an issue where if a kid feels uncomfortable talking to a parent about whatever issue, that when they maybe lack a safe place to go to like a school to maybe access that information from a non-judgmental level, that if the schools are automatically going to contact the parent, that it might stop them from engaging in like the curiosity of asking those questions?
Well, isn't that part of what the Don't Say Gay bill issue was? Like that they had to out the student. Like that, like
Is
I
that
agree with
still
you.
part of the bill, by the way? Was that still part of it?
Oh, I know they're prohibited from making like school rules and stuff about not.
No,
not
that was
telling.
part of the bill. I don't remember if the amendment passed or not. That they had to out the kid unless it was going to cause harm to the child. And then I know that that part, unless it was going to cause harm, was directly removed, and I don't remember if that was placed back in. But like things like that is directly the issue. It's like, yeah, I think if you go to you should have the ability to go to a teacher and be like, hey, here's something I have a problem with. Here's something I want to talk about with something like that. And then I think it should be up to the teacher. I think if you think that the child is going to cause direct harm to themselves or somebody else, like if you think that there may be a school shooting because this is America, you probably should be contacting at least the parents, if not the police. But I think that's also a teacher's prerogative based on like, you know, what would do the least amount of harm there. I think that's what they have to prioritize there.
All right. Does anyone have any closing statements before we go on to our final topic of the discussion?
Yeah, I've got one just thing real quick. This isn't like a gotcha or anything like that. But Biggs, I just wanted to just ask you. So if a school in San Francisco is like, or a school in California is learning about different things in their social studies class, and let's say it's in Harvey Milk Day comes up, which is like just a holiday, can a third grader kind of celebrate, you know, they celebrate Labor Day or here's Thanksgiving. Harvey Milk Day is big in this community. Can we talk about who Harvey Milk was and you know, we don't have to get into his assassination or anything, but why is this person important? That's kind of just and I don't know if you want to answer, but that's just kind of something that can come up.
I mean, I think that's, you know, I mean, as part of history of the area, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think the problem comes when you start getting into the more nitty gritty, and if they're not doing that, then I'm fine with it. I mean, I don't. The thing about these at least the bill in Florida or whatever, it doesn't say that you can't discuss it. It says you can't make curriculums about it, right? So I mean, again, and I know maybe the vagueness of the bill or whatever, you know, might make it, you know, seem like they, you know, could get in trouble for it, you know, maybe. But I think that if it's something with a, you know, a historical figure, like I said, I'm perfectly fine with that. A lot of, I know, like Alexander the Great was probably at least bisexual, if not, you know, homosexual. I mean, I think things like that are perfectly reasonable to mention, but you don't need to get into the more, you know, other things that questions can arise from it, especially like I said, at young ages. I think a lot of these things, you know, maybe a third grade might have something like that, especially if it's in their local area. But I just don't think that, you know, like I said, the parents and teachers need to have a trust, and they need to be able to come up with ways to communicate with each other, so that way they're both kind of on the same page with what they want the children to learn. Again, if there is a discrepancy in that and a teacher is super ideological and they want to force this on the child, I think that's a case where I'd say, hey, maybe this parent might want to pull their kid out from it or whatever, and, you know, maybe find a different school or something like that.
Can I ask one question to you, Biggs?
Sure.
You mentioned the nitty gritty when it comes to Harvey Milk. Harvey Milk was the first openly homosexual person to run for office, won, and was killed because he was a homosexual. Now, obviously you're going to teach that to that third grader because it's a prominent day in that community. Is it okay to teach that he was a homosexual and not explain what homosexuality is? Because that is a very important basic part, not nitty gritty at all.
I think that the conversations that can be had that are appropriate can be had. Again, I think that it's something that, you know, what I would say is, like, in that situation specifically, I would say that it's perfectly fine to say, you know, Harvey Milk was the first, you know, homosexual person to run for, you know, was it mayor? Was it mayor? Yeah. So I think that's perfectly reasonable. Then it gets a little dicey when you start talking about like assassination and stuff like that, especially with like young kids in general. But I think it's perfectly, you know, fine to say, hey, you know, this guy was basically
I was learning that MLK was assassinated in kindergarten.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be similar to how you taught MLK's death.
Right, exactly. So
and
that's
then
what I
as
would
they
say.
Get later, you can go into like
exactly.
You know,
exactly
he was actually
like
a socialist, and the government tried to kill him, and like things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So I think that it's perfectly fine to have it, but I think what I mean by nitty gritty is, I mean, I think if a child says, you know, what does that mean? You'd probably just say something along the lines of, you know, it was just a he was persecuted because of how he lived his life. Just something simple like that. You wouldn't have to get into, I mean, especially
So
again,
it
as
would be
you get
inappropriate to say
older,
that he loved a
that
man?
answer would change, right? I think that would be fine too. I think maybe if you wanted to go that route, I was just kind of thinking off the top of my head. If you want to say he loved another man, that was why he was, something like that. I think that's fine. But I think you have to eventually draw a line because, like, I know some of you have children on this panel. When you start opening up children about like things, they say, well, why? Well, why? Well, why? Well, why? Like, and it's fine. But like eventually, I mean, I wouldn't want the teacher to be like stuck on the spot to like, hey, kind of explain this whole situation about this, guy who got killed. And again, I just think that we have to have a open line of communication between the children, between the teachers, and between the parents, because that's what really makes a strong educational system in my eyes.
So we are not going to skate over this conversation whatsoever. In fact, it perfectly segues into our final conversation of the day, which is teaching children about sexual orientation and gender identity, quote unquote, indoctrination, because that is a very consistent theme of discussion that I've been seeing around the country. I want to start off with Fresh Faces, New Ideas. What is your thought on this question?
I'm sorry, I missed the question. Somebody sent me bits and I had to respond to them.
I got to go take a break and use the restroom. I'll be right back.
Classic.
Desmond, I can start with this.
Please, thank you.
So the question for anyone who may have missed it is teaching gender identity or sexual orientation. Is it indoctrination? Was that a fair assessment of what the question is?
Yes.
I would say no, because one just quick example, we've been teaching nothing but heterosexuality in schools for hundreds of years, and therefore there are no homosexual people in America anymore. I don't think that's true. I think sexuality, gender, these are a part of society. These are a part of everyone in one way or another. It's not indoctrination to teach people how people feel or how they feel about themselves. I mean, I don't think any school, I don't think any community in the country is wanting to indoctrinate people for some weird nefarious purpose that doesn't really make sense to me. This is who we are as humanity, and this is who we are as a society. We're learning new things every day. I don't know everything that there is. Everyone is learning new things all the time, and it's important for us to learn them at a young age, so we don't feel fearful about them when we get older, because now we're seeing people who are seeing changes in society, and their first reaction is fear. My first reaction is curiosity and trying to understand things. So I think that's what we're trying to teach children, is not this is the right way or this is the wrong way. This is a way, and maybe you feel that way and maybe you don't, but you come at this from a level of curiosity rather than a level of fear. I think that's not indoctrination.
Okay, thank you for that. Next, I want to go over to Greg. I know that you have to get out of here pretty soon here, so if you want to also add some of your closing in with this, feel free.
Yeah, this question really should be debatable. The whole definition of indoctrination is teaching a one-sided bias issue or ideology, and that's simply not the case when you're teaching sexual orientation and gender identity. Like I said before, it is fact. Trans people exist, non-binary people exist, gay people exist. We exist. We are real people. And teaching that is not one-sided, it's not biased, it's simply the truth. And if something is true and fact, then it should be taught to the kids. That's it. That's all I really have to say.
Okay, Fresh Faces, New Ideas. Are you ready this time?
Yes, I am ready. I apologize.
Okay.
Yeah, look, we do indoctrination all the time. We indoctrinate that capitalism is the greatest system ever, and that therefore nobody has ever had a problem with capitalism, and it was great forever, and it is social. It's perfect, and socialism is bad, and if you help people, it's socialism, and communism is also bad, and fascism is kind of okay, depending on who you talk to. But no, explaining that a gay person exists, it is not going to make another person gay. If anything, there's it's beneficial, because if you're a child who is not aware that they are gay, but it kind of feels that there's something a little different from them than their peers, understanding the existence of other things than heterosexuality is a It's a good thing. So no, just the existence of gay people doesn't mean that you're indoctrinating them, explaining that. Connor's right, because if that was a thing, then everybody would be straight. Then we would have like even concepts that we consider normally have been expanded. Like the concept of whiteness is expanded. Like we indoctrinate that. Like it's all no. The existence of gay people is not, and teaching about it does not make you that. And if you're going to do transgender conversations, especially at a level where people might be considering transitioning, the responsible thing for a teacher to do is say, look, you either need to talk to our psychiatrist, or if the school has access to somebody who's trained to talk to people like that, or you need to talk to your parents about it if you feel safe. Like that's what you should do, because there are pros and cons of transitioning that you need to be aware of. But it's not, that's like explaining those things doesn't make a kid trans. It doesn't make a kid gay any more than me watching Superman save somebody and make out with Lois Lane makes me straight. Like that's like, it's the same. Like just because it's what you consider acceptable propaganda doesn't mean it's not propaganda.
Okay. And next we're going to go over to Biggs.
Can you just refresh me on the question? Sorry, I had to run to the restroom.
Is teaching children about sexual orientation and gender identity, quote unquote, indoctrination?
Okay, so can I get what do you mean by children? Do you mean all the way up through high school? Do you mean like what we're talking about with the bill before? Like when you say children, what do you mean?
I say up to 8th grade is
Let's
what
say elementary school.
Elementary school. Okay. I think that anything, and again, I didn't hear any of the stuff that everybody else said, but I think anything taught in any way could possibly be indoctrination of some kind, depending on how it is taught. I don't think that necessarily means that these type of conversations would be, at least in my consideration, indoctrination, but I think it could happen. The issue that I have with this in general is, like I said before, and I've kind of been saying this whole time, is that I don't think we should be putting these things, these very complex and I don't know, I guess just like social, like very complex social issues that even adults have trouble describing and talking about in children's curriculum without proper thought and whatnot. You wouldn't have a child jump right into particle physics without a strong base in things like, basic math, algebra, stuff like that. So again, I think that having these children learn these things, I think is basically just a waste of curriculum, time, and money. Again, I also don't think it's a bad thing to bring up prominent leaders that have, come from these, like you mentioned, Harvey Milk and stuff like that. For the same reason, I don't think we should have any problem with, civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King and stuff like that. So, but as far as like indoctrination, it just depends on who's teaching it, how they're teaching it, what they're doing. If they're trying to like cut off the lines of communication, or if they're not being transparent, is one of the biggest issues I have about it. Like if somebody's being pretty transparent about it, at least they have, open mind, parents can see it, but whatever. But if somebody's trying to be, very, shady about it, I think that's a huge red flag. But again, I think I'd like to believe that most teachers are doing these types of things in a very nuanced way if they are talking about it. But I just think it just depends on the person.
Okay. Finally, over to Critical Canadian. You are muted.
Yeah, I guess anything that you teach could be a form of indoctrination. I think I largely agree with Connor's points. He took all my talking points, so now I don't know what I'm going to say.
Same again.
I think it's good that kids are introduced to ideas that they might not accept, but they're willing to hear out. Once again, I think this is a topic that I think we're severely lacking on in today's world, especially if you're somebody that is like pro critical thinking. Because you're going to hear a lot of ideas when you get older and when you're an adult, and you need to have like media literacy skills. And I think this kind of contributes to things like that. Having ideas put at you that you don't necessarily have to accept, but are willing to listen to. Are there good and bad ideas out there? Yeah, for sure. Is like teaching LGBTQ stuff indoctrination? No more so than heterosexual, talking points or relationships or anything like that. Yeah, I kind of curious just to see where the conversation goes again.
So I want to go ahead and just first add in a comment from chat from one of our longtime viewers, Daniel Wilson, who was on a previous panel running for Assembly District 38 out of the state of California. Said that nobody that is gay or trans wants to turn other people. It is a hard, painful life. We don't choose it, nor would we force it on anyone else, but our existence deserves to be taught. So thank you, Daniel, for being in the chat. So does anyone want to address anyone else's points as our final topic of this discussion for today?
I want to just say that it just happens to be, I mean, this is just a reality of the situation that, like, you know, we discover our own sexuality at the age that we are in school, you know, 11, 12, 13, 14. These are the ages when we are coming into our own sexuality, and hormones are raging, and you don't know what, you know, this way or that way. So it just happens to be that we are school age when these things are happening to our bodies and our understanding about ourselves. So it's the reality that we have to, as a society, teach children about these things at the school age, because it's at the school age that they're going to face these challenges. There's a reason why, you know, adolescents and teenagers of LGBTQ are at such a risk of suicide or harming themselves, because they're at school age when they're trying to understand these very, very complex topics. So we have to address these issues just at the age, just because that's when it happens.
Yeah, and ideally you'd want like teachers doing it, because they're going to do it multiple times if they're teaching the same grade over and over again. They're going to know what to look for. They're going to know how kids are, like, if they're not, maybe, you know, I don't know, just like warning signs of kids struggling with like mental issues, maybe questioning these things. Like me as a parent, I'm only going to get to do it once because I only have one child, and I'll probably only ever have one child. But as a teacher, and I'm, you know, speaking to previous teachers, they see their students as like an extension of their kids. And a lot of them take it quite seriously. So I think it's good having a support system that has a lot of experience in dealing with kids around these ages. So,
yeah, absolutely. So we're actually, since I see that we are kind of getting to the point here where we've already essentially touched on this subject, we're going to go ahead and just go to closing statements. Critical Canadian, I'm going to start again with you. Just tell everyone a little bit your final thoughts on this subject and where people can find you at outside of this panel.
Yeah, for sure. I'll do so I don't forget to plug myself. You can find me at twitch.tv/Critical Canadian, or you can find me at YouTube at Critical Canadian. I think it's an interesting topic. I can see a lot where both kind of sides are coming from, where you might not want your kids taught this stuff because maybe it's just a difference of ideas. Maybe it's something you don't really understand yourself. I think there's a ton of different issues. I think one thing that would be really neat is that if you were to have like stuff like this taught in schools and stuff, it'd be neat to see PTAs set up the ability for students and teachers alike, or parents, to go and actually see what's taught as part of the curriculum. I think a lot of the times what ends up happening is parents have ideas of what's taught, or maybe misconceptions about what's taught. And it'd be good to actually have parents sit down, and maybe they're lacking the education themselves about the topics. I don't think education just stops when you get out of grade school. I think it's something that you continue on in life. And it'd be good to see more parents kind of understanding or seeing what the curriculums actually hold, instead of just speculating. So yeah, that's my closing statement.
All right. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to go down to Biggs.
Yeah, so I like I said before, I just think that we need to focus on the open lines of communication between the education system and the parents. I think that that's where the best outcomes are going to be had. I also think that if we can have, things like school of choice being more prominent, I think that would actually be good. We already see a lot of kind of like back and forth about like what parents, different parents want their kids being taught different things. And I think this whole one size fits all that we have currently probably isn't the best system. I know it seems, good, and we want to try to put more money into it. And I think we should. It's one of the things I do agree where government should put more money in, but I think it should be more freedom for the parents to choose. And hopefully that would improve the system. As far as indoctrination goes, anything can be indoctrination. I like I said, I hope most people aren't doing that. But we have seen cases where it has happened. I think it's perfectly reasonable for parents, if they don't want these things to be in their schools, and bills like that Florida bill, they voted for these these state lawmakers. They made the laws that they think that people want to make or whatever. And if they don't, they're not happy with it, they'll have them voted out next time. That's why we live in this representative democracy. So hopefully we can kind of try to make the best of all those worlds in the society that we live in, and make the right choices, and the kids can learn what they want to learn, and the parents and the teachers can be supportive of them no matter what their cases are or what their issues are. I just want kids to be happy and supported, and that's what we should all strive for. So
Okay, and next over to Connor.
Yeah, I think I find this stuff fascinating, and I love the complexity of it all. And I think that that's what makes the world a very interesting place, is how kind of complex and ingrained these things are. I think one of the problems with politics, and it's a world that I'm diving in head first, is that they're trying to make complex subjects simple with easy to understand answers, and that's just not the way the world works. So I think the more people learn, and your audience and stuff who are actively tuning in, I think that's wonderful. The more you learn, the more different perspectives you see. I think it makes you a better person. Before I forget to plug myself, it's connorhallbleib.com. I am the Democratic nominee candidate. I'm on the general election ballot in November for Kentucky's 5th congressional district for U.S. Congress. Go to my website, or Connor_Hallbleib on Twitter, CONORHALBLEIB. Give me a follow. It really helps. And if you've got a few dollars, go to my Act Blue and donate if you possibly can. So thank you all. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Next, we're going to go over to Greg.
Yeah. So like I said before, this Don't Say Gay bill is bullshit. Teaching sexual orientation and gender identity, and just the LGBTQIA plus community in general won't turn your kid gay. That's some stupid shit. And it's finally teaching a group of marginalized people that never got to the top before. That's basically what it is. That's all I really have to say. And then where to find me? You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Greg_4_change. And you can also catch Let's Talk on YouTube, sometimes on Mondays, sometimes on Tuesdays. Editing's hard, y'all. And you can look at Let's Talk's Instagram and Twitter at Let's Talk_on YT.
All right, and finally, Fresh Faces, New Ideas.
Yeah, I'm Fresh Faces New Ideas. I stream during the week. It varies, job times, and things like that. If you can find me on twitch.tv/Fresh Faces New Ideas. You can find me on Twitter at Faces Ideas. The Twitter has linked to my Discord. I post all my times in the Discord and on Twitter. I talk politics. I talk to pretty much anybody about most political topics. As for this bill, look, LGBTQ plus people, they're not a problem. They're good. They're friends. They have a lot of issues based on just not being accepted, to pretend that they're coming for your children, to do God knows what to them is nonsense. Explain similar to a lot of the history and the other issues, explaining on to a basic level to a child about gender identity or sexuality is really not that complicated. It's also not going to be involving explaining how to give a kid a blowjob. Like, it's we're like, to equate those things are nonsense. To say that there's some hidden agenda to turn your kid gay just shows you don't understand how it works. Basically, like, don't be afraid of things you don't understand. It's actually, we have more access to information than at any point in history. Learning things is fun, even if those things, don't agree with your worldview. This bill, I think this is the bill's problem, and I think it's the bigger problem from it is the immediate switch to the rampant homophobia that came like immediately after it is more of an issue than anything else. I think you really should look at the scale of that these bills are dealing with. And then you should look at your legislators and decide, like, if you're in a state that passed one of these anti-LGBTQ bills or these anti-trans in sports bills, look into it. In Florida, there have been 13 trans athletes since 2000. In Utah, there is one child. Understand what the issues that are happening in your place are, and look at the laws that are being passed. And get more involved. Vote for people like Connor. That's what I have to say.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming on the panel today. I do appreciate everyone coming on, having their perspectives and sharing them with everyone. And it's kind of especially if you're not used to being on a panel, can be a little intimidating getting up here, being live, having people watching you. So I do appreciate everyone coming
There's
on
people
today.
watching this?
There are people watching this.
Wait, this is live? Oh my Lord.
It is definitely live. There are people on YouTube right now watching. So I want to thank everyone for coming on. I want to just give my final 2 cents about this before we wrap up. I also want to say that if you're watching this in the future, everyone's links will be in the episode description of this YouTube video. So you can go in the episode description now, check out everyone's links to their social medias, their YouTube channels, Twitch channels, however. So we are going to be doing another one of these panels tomorrow night as well. Monday at 6:00 Eastern time, there'll be another live panel with a new group of people. This is a topic that I wanted to bring to the forefront for my particular audience, because going into this election cycle, which will start ramping up here in the next few months, it seems as though the conversation is going to be centered around what are called issues, but they're not really issues. You know, the Republican Party last year tried to pass over 300 bills around the country about election fraud. That was never an issue in the 2020 election. They're trying to make CRT an issue when teaching about the history of systemic, racism in our country should not be an issue. They're trying to make it one. And now we're seeing this also with LGBTQ issues, saying that, we can't allow these issues to be taught to kids in school, as if teaching about issues that involve the LGBTQ community is somehow controversial or should be strange or should be abnormal in some way, shape, or fashion. I think that's largely trash. And so I wanted to have a conversation about it and see other people's issues or other people's perspectives on it. So trying to create diverse panels of people to come on and talk about these issues. I thank everyone for coming on today and giving me their perspectives. Whether I completely agreed with people or disagree with them, I think it's good to have these conversations in an open forum like this so that you can hear the objections in real time. So thank you for everyone who watched today. We'll be having another panel tomorrow. Make sure that you subscribe to my YouTube channel, Independent Thoughts, so that you do not miss future panels. We will see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, y'all.